Money Stop Mafia. It's cousin Cole Cusumano back with the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, the Money Stop, here to talk all things Kansas. As always, we are presented by kickingthetires.net. And first things first, in case you couldn't tell, I am solo yet again. Steven was unable to record due to his broadcasting duties, and I was unable to find a fill-in under such short notice. However, I do know where to go from here, as it seems every other week Steven is unable to record due to prior obligations at the ballpark in Jersey. So I've tapped my friend Cody Johnson, who I've mentioned previously on this show, to be the Corey Haim to Steven's Eric Jones, if you will, kind of our reserve host, if you will, for these situations. But for this week, you're stuck with me yet again. You know the drill. I'll try and keep it short as possible. You don't want to hear me talking for our normal 45, 50 minutes. So with that said, I did preview this show on my personal social media account at Cole_Cusumano_. In saying that I'm calling my shot much like Denny Hamlin. But before I get into that, I will jump into a quick Dover recap. As just mentioned, Denny Hamlin called his shot on his podcast, Actions Detrimental, that he would win Dover, and he indeed did. He now ties William Byron for the most wins in the series through 11 races with 3. And this was a statement victory, man. I think all the talk going in was obviously Hendrick Motorsports is the team to beat. But this felt like an exclamation mark from Denny in saying that this is a much tighter two-team race than we had thought going into Dover. And just looking at what Denny's done this year already through 11 races, his 3 wins are already tied for as many as he got all of last season. So I think this team has come to play. Denny is for real, and he is just so good for the sport. I don't care if you love him, if you hate him. Like, when Denny's talking, the racing world listens, and for good reason. I think he's awesome. I think he's a great personality, a great character, a great ambassador for the sport. And as far as Dover is concerned, you know, for the first 2 stages, I was pretty bored. I did not see a whole lot of movement throughout the field. And I think what was evident, clear as day, especially with the ending of the race, is that whoever had the lead was not going to lose it. And I don't think we saw any real changes for the lead outside of, like, pit stops and stuff like that. Any green flag passes are eluding me right now. But I think I would have liked to see the tires wear like they normally do at Dover. Didn't feel like they put down enough rubber. Don't think they wore out enough to where tire management played a factor in this race like it usually does at this track. But I think the final stage was really interesting, especially getting down to those last, whatever it was, 20 or so laps with Denny and Larson going back and forth. That was, I think, peak Dover, just that back and forth, cat and mouse, reeling it in, pulling away. Really, really fun watch there. Overall, I would say it was a pretty uniform Dover race in the next-gen car. You know, nothing great, nothing terrible, just kind of like a little bit of the in-between, bit lackluster. Again, I would like to see maybe a new tire brought here next year, but I do love this track. I love seeing the fans show out, love seeing Miles the Monster, and just, you know, the challenges that come with being a driver and having to master this specific concrete mile. Closing the chapter on Dover, we'll do a top 10 rundown here. Obviously, once again, Denny Hamlin, the winner, led the most laps for all intents and purposes, somewhat dominated this race. Second place again was Kyle Larson, followed by Martin Truex Jr. Then you've got Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott rounding out the top 5, followed by our highest scored Ford of the weekend and Noah Gragson riding back-to-back top 10s in 6th, followed by another Ford and Ryan Blaney, Alex Bowman, one of our sleepers, in 8th, Daniel Hemrick also with back-to-back top 10s in 9th, and then Ty Gibbs making a top 10 appearance, rounding out the 10th spot. So solid week overall for analysis on our end. We had 5 of our 12 drivers mentioned inside the top 10 this week. But looking ahead to Kansas, I am fired up for multiple reasons. The first being that this is one of, if not the best tracks, I would say, in this next-gen car. The racing here has been outstanding. Every race here has just been must-watch TV, so cannot wait for that. And then at the top of the show, I mentioned calling my shot on social media about this specific show. Look, I feel extremely confident in the 12 drivers I'm about to mention here. But in my tweet I sent out, I said that the 12 drivers would probably make up the top 15. That's a really tight window right there. So I'll double down with my confidence in saying that I think that the 12 drivers mentioned will mostly make up the top 20. And I feel really, really confident about that. So without further ado, let's kick things off for the Advent Health 400 weekend at Kansas, beginning with our race winner odds per BetMGM. Pre-qualifying, we will take it to the bank. The odds-on favorite for the win is going to be Kyle Larson at plus 400, followed by last week's winner, Denny Hamlin, at plus 450. Third best odds, a bit of a drop-off to the most recent winner at Kansas, Tyler Reddick, at plus 600. Then you've got William Byron and Martin Truex Jr. rounding out the top 5 race winner odds at plus 800. So with that, let's kick things off here into our favorites category. Taking it to the bank, Toyota is undefeated in the next-gen era at Kansas. So 4 starts, Toyota has went to victory lane all 4 times. 3 of those wins have gone to 2311 Racing, and specifically the 45 car. So without further ado, let's kick things off here with Denny Hamlin. Once again, the second best odds to win the race at plus 450, but the most expensive driver in DFS at $11,300. Again, coming off a series best tying third win of the season, a statement victory at Dover, I think Denny Hamlin has what it takes to go back-to-back, because he has been the best driver by far in the next gen at Kansas in 4 starts. 2.3 average finish, which sounds completely made up, but it is indeed true. Again, 2.3 average in 4 starts at Kansas with 1 win, 2 runner-ups, and he's also one of 2 drivers with top 10s in all 4 starts, the other one being Kyle Larson. He also has the most active wins there with 4, and he's riding a 5-race top 5 streak at Kansas. Also want to mention that Denny Hamlin has led in every single race this season, all 11. That is great in terms of DFS. And when you consider that he is tied for the most wins, he is the best of the best at Kansas, it makes him almost a no-brainer for DFS and for a race winner bet. So love Denny this weekend, as well as our runner-up from last week in Kyle Larson, who is once again the favorite for the win at plus 400 and the second most expensive driver in DFS at $11,000. And I think we're getting a sense now that this is going to be a 2-driver battle for the regular season championship. And I could be wrong here, but it seems like Denny and Kyle are the 2 favorites for sure at this point in the season, going into the 12th race. Kyle Larson finished runner-up for a second time this season at Dover. Also picked up his series best 5th top 5 along the way. Also want to note, while Denny Hamlin has led laps in every single race this season, Kyle Larson has led the most laps in 2024, and he's been the clear dominant car on the traditional mile-and-a-half tracks this season. It was no contest in Vegas. He had a really fast car in Texas before an issue took him out of contention, but looking at his Kansas resume, he's riding a 5-race top 10 streak, contrasted to Denny Hamlin's 5-race top 5 streak, with a win and 2 runner-ups as well, so very similar stat line to Denny. Just some very, very minor differences. So in regards to laps led, which is obviously a big portion of DFS, both have been great in this aspect. Just mentioned, Denny Hamlin's led in all 11 races this season. Larson has the most laps led in 2024. But in reference to Kansas, Kyle Larson has led over 340 laps in those 4 next-gen starts to Hamlin's 97. So pretty significant difference there. And then in terms of results, Hamlin's had the upper hand. He has a 2.8 average finish to Kyle Larson's 3.4 average finish. So either way you look at it, it's like splitting hairs. Pick your preference at that point, but I think pick one of those drivers for sure. For the race win and for your lineups, you've got to go with Denny Hamlin or Kyle Larson. There's no doubt about it. But as a couple of guys who can serve as some spoilers with a legitimate shot at the win are 2 more Toyotas in Martin Truex Jr. and Tyler Reddick. The first I'll go off of is Truex at plus 800 for the race win and $10,300 for DFS, our least expensive driver in this favorites category for DFS in that regard. He's coming off his first top 10 in 3 weeks this season, so there was a point where we had pegged Truex, Bell, Gibbs, and then Buescher as 4 drivers who were the most consistent and the best in the series. Pretty much after that highlighted segment, all 4 drivers have fallen off. They've been very inconsistent, Very bad luck, but this is a good step in the right direction for Truex, who obviously had really good speed to start the year off. Looking at Kansas, he's got 2 wins here, courtesy of a sweep back in 2017, and he has the most laps led among active drivers here with over 900. In the next gen, though, 3 top 10s in 4 starts, a best finish of 5th, and he crashed on lap 3 in the most recent race, so a bit of a skewed sample size there. Either way, though, 3 top 10s with that outlier crash last in the most recent race. Really, really good look for Truex, coming off that momentum as well from last week at Dover. And then we'll move over on to Tyler Reddick, our most recent winner at Kansas. Again, the third best odds to win at plus 600 and $10,700 for DFS. He was able to back up his win at Talladega with an 11th place outing at Dover, which might have snapped a 3-race top 10 streak, but just barely. So Tyler Reddick has been on a really, really good roll lately. He's also tied for the most top 10s in the series with William Byron at 7. And looking at his mile-and-a-half program, just this year, 2nd place and 4th place at Vegas and Texas respectively. Very easily could have won that Vegas race had it been another lap or 2 longer. And we also mentioned on that Texas show his impressive resume at the mile-and-a-halfs last year, which was just completely ridiculous. So he's always going to be a strong contender for the win when we come to these mile-and-a-half tracks, but especially Kansas, when you consider that he won the most recent race there and finished 9th in the spring last year as well. He's also led laps there in all 4 next-gen starts, so Tyler Reddick, really, really good pick. I love these favorites for this week. Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, Martin Truex Jr., and Tyler Reddick. But if you're going based off race winner picks and DFS, you got to find a way to get some money on Denny Hamlin and or Kyle Larson. Moving on to our sleepers, a lot of familiar names we've talked about in recent weeks. And I'm going to kick that off right now with Chase Elliott, who's been a mainstay in this category for quite a while now. He's valued at plus 1,000 for the race win and $9,800 for DFS. Chase Elliott now has 4 top 5s over his last 5 starts, with the lowest finish of 15th coming at Talladega. So really, really strong stretch for that 9 team. He also won the last mile-and-a-half race this season at Texas. And looking at Kansas, he has 1 win back in 2018 in the fall, got 2 runner-ups and a series-best 10.6 average in 16 starts. Also top 10 with laps led in both races last year, finishing 7th and 6th respectively. I think you look at who the best drivers in the sport have been collectively this season. Chase Elliott is definitely in that vein. He's been a top 3 or 4 driver the entire season. That's also made evident by his 3rd place positioning in the standings. And I look for him to be a weekly contender every single week, to put it simply. Moving on now to another guy from the Gibbs stable in Christopher Bell, who I just mentioned, having not the best luck since going on that really consistent stretch of top 10s. He is also valued at plus 1,000 for the race win and a steep $10,000 for DFS. He has no finish better than 17th in his last 4 starts, and he's finished 34th or lower in the other 3 races, so not been good for that 20 team. And that's kind of been the story of his career as of late in the Cup Series. He'll have a really, really tough regular season. They'll make the playoffs courtesy of a win or 2, and then once the playoffs roll around, they'll start getting their results, getting their wins, and that's when it really matters. But just in terms of betting and all that in the regular season, it's really, really tough to go with Christopher Bell. Very volatile in that sense. But looking at his next-gen stats at Kansas, top 10 in 3 of 4 starts, laps led in all 4 starts, and finished 8th in the most recent race there, and top 5 in both 2023 races. So he's had speed there, had success there in the next gen, and Toyota's won, all 4 races in the next gen at Kansas. So definitely a really good pick, as is fellow Toyota teammate Bubba Wallace, who is plus 1,400 for the race win and $9,500 for DFS. And this is a driver who I'm really impressed by the last couple of weeks. Not so much from the on-track stuff because he has 2 straight DNFs, but specifically how he's held himself following those DNFs, the composure he's displayed. And this is something that we've seen all season long. Bubba's seemed like he's been in a much better headspace. He's been very vocal about how he's happier at the racetrack, loves what he's doing, wants to be better at what he's doing, and putting the work and the time in to do that. And I found his comments very interesting following Dover because he mentioned this yet again, and he looked very composed, but he wanted to kind of double down on that because he's welcoming his first child into the world here in a few months, and he knows that he has to kind of be a rock for his wife and his future child and that family. And that begins with the mental. And I think he acknowledges that. He knows that. And we've seen so many times, once these younger drivers start having kids, it usually translates to good results on the track just because you got to mature a lot in that process. And I think a few guys to name specifically, like John Hunter Nemechek, Chris Buescher. So I think we'll see more consistent results down the road. But for the time being, like, the speed's there. Bubba's running very well. It's just a matter of putting it all together and keeping that strong headset going into these races. And I think this is a great weekend for Bubba to stop the bleeding going into Kansas, because in the next gen, he's finished top 10 in 3 of 4 next gen starts with 1 win and a 4th place finish last spring. The only outlier being the most recent race at Kansas in the fall of last year, where he crashed from the lead with the tire issue. So definitely skewed in that sense. Should not take away from the fact that he's been clearly one of the most dominant cars at that track, period, in the next gen. And on top of the fact he finished 7th with laps led in the most recent mile-and-a-half race this season. And lastly, like Reddick, we've noted numerous times his prowess on these mile-and-a-half tracks in the next-gen car. He's been a contender, it seems like, every single time we go to these tracks over the last couple years. I believe it was 5 top 5s and 7 starts at traditional mile-and-a-half last year. So Bubba Wallace, he's got to be someone that's definitely in your lineup as someone who can score a lot of points and win this race potentially. Again, his odds for the race winner plus 1,400, and then he's $9,500 for DFS. Really, really good value there. Finally, we will round out our sleepers category with Bowman the Showman. Alex Bowman, valued at plus 2,000 for the race win and $8,000 for DFS, which is a borderline value pick number right there. Very quietly, Bowman has been one of the more consistent drivers over the last few weeks, riding now back-to-back top 10s in 2024. At Kansas in his career, top 10s in half his 16 starts with a best finish of 2nd back in 2019. In the next gen, he has been a top 10 driver, finishing right there in 3 of 4 starts with a lowest finish of 11th. So really, really good there. 10th in the most recent race with over 100 laps led and a 4th place finish in this race last year. So Alex Bowman, again, very under the radar, but a very, very good pick, especially for DFS, and maybe even a top 5 prop bet going into the Advent Health 400. Last but not least, we will end our driver analysis with our value picks, and I have to say, I think this could be our best value picks section in the history of the show. And that's a big statement, but when I get through all these names here, I think you'll understand why. And there's some really deep dives. That's why I'm saying this. So, usually we might have like an Alex Bowman or Austin Cindric or these bigger name drivers with steeper values in this section, but these are all deep dives, and I think they're all really, really sneaky good picks. I'll kick things off here with our second least expensive driver in Carson Hocevar at $6,300. And he is a really good pick, in my opinion, because first of all, he's had like top 20 speed the entire season, but on the mile-and-a-halfs, he's been really, really good. So finished 15th at Vegas and then scored his first top 10 of his Cup career at Texas, the most recent race on a mile-and-a-half this year. Those finishes at Vegas and Texas are actually his best in 2024 so far. So want to keep an eye on that number 77 car. The same thing can be said about Austin Dillon as well. We mentioned how bad he's been this season. 25.1 average through 11 starts and only 1 top 10. However, that 1 top 10 did come on a mile-and-a-half track. And like Carson Hocevar, his best showings have come on mile-and-a-half tracks this season. He finished 16th at Vegas and 8th at Texas. And as far as Kansas is concerned, he finished 10th there last spring and has 3 top 15s and 4 next-gen starts. So Austin Dillon, a really good reach, a good deep dive here at $6,500 for DFS. As is our least expensive driver at $5,500 in Daniel Hemrick. He's coming off his first back-to-back top 10 stretch in his entire Cup career. He also finished top 20 at both mile-and-a-half tracks this season, on par with his season average 22nd place finish. And what I want to note here is that the top 20 isn't like super flashy, neither is the 22nd place finish average, but you look at his average starting spot in 28.4, that makes him a really underrated DFS pick this week, Just seeing as he scored top 20s in both mile-and-a-half tracks this season, and his season average is 22nd place, which is still 6 positions better than his average starting spot. So if Daniel Hemric starts deep in the pack, I would say like 25th or deeper, he would be a really, really solid pick for DFS this weekend. For our final value pick, we have our first Ford mentioned of the episode in Noah Gragson, and he is the most expensive driver from this section at $7,400. He has been one of the most consistent Ford drivers all season. He is also riding back-to-back top 10s, much like Daniel Hemric, and he has a 6th place finish at Vegas and 18th place finish at Texas. Looking at his Kansas resume as a whole, he has 1 win in Xfinity and trucks there, so it's a place he knows how to get around. He's been for sure one of the top 5 Ford drivers all season, and for that, I think this makes him a really interesting driver to watch going into Kansas. And overall, I like all 4 of these drivers: Carson Hocevar, Noah Gragson, Austin Dillon, and Daniel Hemric. And I think all 4 have a really good chance to make a really big impact in your lineup to win you a lot of money. That's 12 drivers. From the favorites: Hamlin, Larson, Truex, and Reddick. From the sleepers: Bowman, Elliott, Wallace, and Bell. And again, for the value picks: Hocevar, Gragson, Austin Dillon, and Hemric. Gotta dwindle that down to 6 drivers. I will go with Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson for favorites. I will go Chase Elliott and Bubba Wallace for sleepers. And I will go Carson Hocevar and Noah Gragson for my value picks. Next up, we have big money bets. These are prop bets, such as top 5, top 10 finishers, to where you can put a larger sum of money down and feel more confident with your bet that you're making. For me, I have 3 in mind that I like so far. The first being Bubba Wallace to finish top 5 at plus 190. I know he has back-to-back DNFs, but you look at his resume on the mile-and-a-halfs in the next-gen car, it makes it very difficult to not feel good about that top 5 finisher prop, especially taking into account he has the win, 4th place finish, 7th place finish, and he had that crash from the lead last fall. So I think Bubba Wallace to finish top 5 is a really good prop to bet on, as well as Chase Elliott to finish top 5 at plus 125, seeing as he finished right there inside the top 5 for the last 5 weeks this season, and that one outlier was at Talladega, a drafting track. So that one almost seems like a lock to me, plus 125, Chase Elliott to finish top 5. And then my final big money bet is a group prop. It is Alex Bowman to finish ahead of Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano at plus 130. I like that one quite a bit. I know we had higher expectations for Alex Bowman last week to get a top 5, and he wound up getting a top 10 still, back-to-back top 10s in the season now. And on top of the fact of Brad, Buescher, and Logano not being the best in the next gen at Kansas, they're also all in Fords, and we've seen how much they've struggled this season. So factoring in momentum and just what Alex Bowman's been able to do at Kansas in his career and in the next gen, this one seems like a lock as well. Plus 130 for Alex Bowman to finish ahead of Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano. Next up, we have our head-to-head parlayable matchups. I'll go ahead and rattle off these 5 matchups. Reddick versus Bell, Truex versus Byron, Wallace versus Elliott, Hamlin versus Larson, and Gibbs versus Gragson. I will keep this short and simple for you. The only one that I like is Reddick over Bell at minus 140, which could be a big money bet, but to be honest, I'm not really a fan of any of these this weekend. I don't think there's enough value there for me to, put money down on that Reddick versus Bell one. Maybe if you want to parlay it with a prop bet, like a top 5 for Elliott or Wallace, but honestly, I wouldn't do these ones this week. I think it's too much 50-50 shot there. But I do want to give you guys the option, obviously, if you guys feel confidently one way or the other with these matchups to have that. So there's those for you. And then final order of business is going to be our recommended DFS lineup for Kansas. I feel awesome with the lineup that I have submitted here, but I also have an alternate one that I feel really good about as well, and I'll let you guys decide which one's better. So the one that I'm locking in for this show, it leads off with Denny Hamlin at $11,300. I mentioned during the favorites analysis, you would have to get either Denny Hamlin or Kyle Larson or both in there if you want to make any sort of money this weekend. So Denny Hamlin's leading this thing off. I think he has a great shot to go back-to-back. He's, again, the most expensive driver at $11,300. From there, I went with the two-headed monster in Chase Elliott at $9,800 and Bubba Wallace at $9,500. And from there, rounded it out with three of our value picks in Noah Gragson at $7,400, Carson Hocevar at $6,300, and Daniel Hemrick at $5,500. Now, for an alternate, I was able to get both Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson in there. However, I was unable to fit in Chase Elliott and Bubba Wallace and put in Bowman instead. So what I had for the other lineup was Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, Noah Gragson, Carson Hocevar, and Daniel Hemrick. And to be honest, I think I might like that one a little bit more, only because the volatility of Bubba Wallace at Kansas and just in general so far this season. But at the same time, I think they're both really good lineups. I think that this Wallace and Elliott one is just more consistent throughout. So I guess pick your poison. Like I said, fit Bowman and or Larson in there for sure. And it should set you up for a really good, profitable weekend. Final order of business, putting my money where my mouth is. So I'll lock in this DFS lineup. Hamlin, Elliott, Wallace, Gragson, Hocevar, and Hemrick. And I'll lock in my one big money bet, and that's going to be the Bowman over Busher, Brad, and Logano at plus 130. So I do feel great about the Elliott top 5 at plus 125, but when you consider the fact that it's Bowman against 3 Fords and his resume at Kansas collectively and in the next gen, this is the definition of a big money bet and, putting my money where my mouth is. So love that one. And then we're going to end the show, obviously, with picking a race winner and sleeper pick. For a race winner, I hate going with back-to-back winners, but I do feel great about Denny Hamlin this weekend. However, I do feel great about Kyle Larson as well. And I think what's interesting is, going through these shows and picking our race winners and whatnot, I feel like whenever we pick a Hendrick guy for the win, but we're on the fence about a Gibbs guy, the Gibbs guy wins. So maybe, once again, if I feel good about a Gibbs guy, Hendrick guy's going to win this week. So I'll lock in Denny, but I feel great about Larson as well, so maybe that means he'll win this weekend. And for a sleeper, I'm going to go with a deep dive here, sort of a gut check, and someone I feel really good about from our value pick section. I will go with Carson Hocevar. Again, he already has one top 10 on a mile and a half this year. That's where his 2 best races were so far in 2024. And I just like what I've seen from this driver the entire season. He's been, like I said, a top 20 car. He's 20th in the standings right now. And I think he'll get a top 20 finish here at Kansas. So that'll do it for the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, the money stop. Next up, we got Kansas, the Advent Health 400 coming up on Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on FS1. This is sure to be must-watch TV, as it's been since the inception of the next-gen car. Mile and a halves in general are incredible, but Kansas specifically has been just otherworldly with this 7th-gen car. So enjoy that race. Hope you guys bank out. Like I said, feel really, really good about this episode, and hope you make a lot of money. So crack open a cold dew and enjoy this one. Talk to you later, guys.